Alright, today's video is going to help you with the Build-A-Body to give you some guidance. We're going to focus on the event handler that we have here. And the one thing I want us to really focus on is that down here it says this event handler is for the brain only. It's the only one system that we're going to be working through on here, just to give you some guidance, and you'll have to figure out the rest. So the first thing you'll see here is on our app, we're going to need to be able to get these things to move. So the first thing that we have organized here is to get the brain to drag with the finger. So one of the things that you'll see on the app is that we have to get this sprite to move here. But first we got to get it to move all around the screen. So let's first work on that. So if I go here, you can see that I already have my globalizations put in for the brain and the brain placement. That's going to be key. And actually what I'm going to do is I will drag these things over here on their own so they're separated from the rest of them. And that way we're not confused by any of the other globalizations right now. We'll just keep it separate. Okay. So if the first item on the event handler says we got to get the brain to drag with the finger, then that should be a hint to you that the first programming that we're going to do is going to be with the brain, and it's going to be getting it to be dragged. So we have all our choices here of our actions to start with. Let's grab the dragged. And what we want to do is just as we did with other parts so far this semester or quarter, we want to go ahead and we want to be able to have a move to with the brain. So I'm going to go down with the move to, and we're going to grab the move to for X and Y. And what we want it to do is we want it to be current. So we want it to be able, wherever our finger is currently, to be the current X and the current Y. So if I hover over current X, that gives me the current X. Hover over current X again, or Y, doesn't matter. I'm just going to change it to current Y. Now if we go back to our app and we just do our incremental check, let's see if I can zoom in on this a little better. There we go. If I click on the brain, now it moves around. All right, it's kind of hard to see because my finger's in the way, but you can see that the brain was there. Now it's gone, and now it's able to move around. Okay, so if I was looking at my event handler and I was trying to determine how I'm doing, looks like I got my brain to work. Since I'm worrying just about the brain, I'm going to highlight just the brain part. That means I got that done. I'm doing good. Now, if I can get the brain to work, you know that the programming is going to be pretty similar for all the other things. The other thing that we have here is the touch up. So when I lift my finger, what's going to happen? Well, if the brain is collided with the brain placement, what we want to have, so there's the if part, so you know we're going to have a variable thing here, a conditional statement in our variables. The brain moves to the correct placement. We're going to have to get the brain to be disabled so it doesn't move around anymore. We want the score to go up, and we want the score label to be updated. So if the brain is not collided with the brain placement, that's the other piece that we're going to do. The brain's going to move back to its original location. Now, feature 1 can show up in this location too. This is if we want the opportunity for the score to go down, but that's an extra feature. We're not really worried about the extra feature right now. So let's start putting this together. Now, one of the things I want us to first go back and look at in the designer is we're going to have a score label we're going to need, and we're also going to need to have a reset button eventually. So I'm just going to put these on here real quickly just so we have something. So where it says button there, I'm going to rename it to reset. One word, reset button. And all I'm going to do is just change the text. Okay, I'm not looking for it to be fancy right now. I just want to put these things on here so you can see. I'm going to put a label up on top, and that label up here I'm going to rename as score label so we can present our score. And then down here I'm just going to change the text to score : 0. Now that's all our score is. So real simple, just displaying those things on the top and on the bottom. And again, because we have our app opened up on our tablet, we can see right away that we have the score label now and the reset. Just put in the top and put in the bottom. Real simple. Okay, so now what I want us to do is I want us to start working on that next block, which is the touch up. Okay, so when I lift my finger or touch up, which is another way to think about it. So I'm going to go back into the brain and I'm going to look for the touch up option here. And there's a touch down there. I may reference that in a little bit. We'll see how we're doing here. So what do we need to touch up? Well, as the event handler said, if the brain is collided with the brain placement. So that's the first thing I need to do is I need to think in my if then else statement, because it said if, so I know I'm going to have that. My first thing I have to think about is if the brain is collided with the brain placement. So I have to be able to set it up to say collided with brain placement. So collided with I know is in the brain. So I'm going to go down here and find collided with. There it is. Now I've used that in other apps. And we needed to collide with the brain placement, remember? The brain is going to collide with the brain placement. So what that means is this little dot and this brain are going to touch. Okay? So when I go back here, I have to now go to brain placement, and I have to look for that brain placement box, the one that's going to fit in there. Okay, there it is. I just wanted to join up with the brain placement. Okay, so what's going to happen if it does what it's supposed to? The brain is going to go to the correct place. The brain is going to be disabled, meaning we can't move it around anymore. The score is going to go up, and the score label is going to be updated. So we've done that before where we have to change the score and the score label. So we're going to be looking in the then statement here. So the first thing I remember it saying is we got to get the brain to move to the correct spot. So I know in brain there's a move to box. So let's grab the brain move to. So again, we want it to move to a specific location. We want the brain to move to this brain placement. Since we already have globalization set for brain placement X and brain placement Y, we don't have to go and find the specific coordinates on our canvas. We can go up in here into get, and we can get here, and we'll put another get here, and this will give us brain placement. We want to have the brain placement X and the brain placement Y. Again, that's where we're connecting is that placement piece. So if it collides with the dot, what should happen? It should move to the correct spot. It should be where those ordered pairs are that we already have. So that takes care of the first thing. Then we want to make the brain disabled. So remember, enabled is a true statement, disable is a false statement. So now what we want to do is we want to make sure that if it does collide, the brain is set as an enable, and we just have to make sure it's false. So I'm going to find a brain enabled. There it is. Again, so this is our then statement. So if the brain is set there, it's going to become false, meaning once it clicks in with that dot, it's going to go away. There's going to be no connection to it. Next thing it says here is the score is going to have to go up by 1, so we have to add a score, and the score label has to be updated. So now we have to actually create another globalization for the score. So we're going to go in here in initial globalization. I'm going to name it really simple. I'm just going to put score. Okay. And our score is going to always begin with 0. So now when we set up our piece here, it's going to have to be setting the global score plus 1. So we've made this before. This isn't something brand new. We've done it in other apps. We're going to have to set. Now that we have a globalization, we're going to set the score. And we're going to set the score to whatever it is currently plus 1. So we put our math piece in there, our plus 1. We're always going to go off wherever the score is right now, and we're going to add 1. That way it's incrementing. Now we can set it up to go up by 1, by 2, by 5. It doesn't matter, but We just want to show that it can go up by 1. So if I look at our event handler, it looks like we were able to do all these things that were required. Now, I don't know if it works yet. We're going to have to test that. Okay? But now we have to think about what if it doesn't connect. So this is the else statement. If it doesn't connect, it has to go back to the original location. So again, that means that the brain has to go back to where it is right now. So if I drag this to the wrong spot, it shouldn't stay there. It should, boop, go back to its original location. So let's make sure we can program that real quick. Again, that is a move to statement. And now what we need to do is we need to make sure we move it to its original brain X and its original brain Y. So I'm going to go grab a move to again. I'm going to put it in here. And I'm going to grab 2 more. Actually, I'm just going to copy these. Nice. Again, right now it says placement. We want it to say original. So original X with X and original Y with Y. Now when I go to test this, what's going to happen if I drag the brain to the dot? It should stop moving, right? And I won't be able to touch it again. On the touch up, next time I lift up, it's not going to be able to do anything. If I don't go to the right spot, it should go right back to its original location. But what if I want to make sure it's working properly? This is where, before I'm going to do anything, I'm going to make sure I have something set in my reset button first before I move on to anything else. So remember, the reset button is going to build as we go. That's just how reset buttons work. It's something so we can put things back to its original location. So I want to do something on the click. So we're going to put the reset button over here so we can have that there. And real simple, all we want to have happen on the reset button is we want the brain to go back to where it originally began. So really, we want the same block here so that it goes back to its original location. So I'm going to actually copy this. I'm going to put it here. Okay. So our reset button is going to be able to make the brain go back, but it also needs to move back to its original location, but we also need to enable the brain again, right? Because we said if it goes into this dot, it can't move anymore. It's stuck. So we're going to have to go make sure that we also allow this to be enabled to be able to move again. So we use this block to make it false so it can't move. So if I copy this, I can put this in the reset button, and now all I have to do is say true. You could move it again if you got it in the right spot. So if I look at that, I've actually taken care of setting up the touch up and the reset button for enabling the brain, moving the brain back to its original location. And now I have to also, in the reset, set the score back to 0 and update the label. Again, we're doing a lot of reverse work from the stuff that we already put over here. So now all we have to do is real quickly just set up the score piece to also be reset. So remember, our globalization up here for the score was 0. So we want to be able to set the global score back to 0. Okay, after we're done playing with it, it should be back to 0. And don't forget, that also means that we have to update our score label to go back to 0. It should look like that every time we're done. So I'm going to click on score label. We're going to make sure we have the text set. Get in there. There we go. And we're going to set our text to the same thing I have written down here already. Score, space 0. Score, space 0. Okay. Reset button is going to add as we go, but at least we have the simple things here for us to be able to do this piece. So now we're going to test our work, and we're going to see if we were successful in getting the lift up. And we're going to make sure that our reset button is set for that stuff. You see, I didn't do anything with the additional features. I'm just trying to do the basic things to get our brain to move around properly. Okay, so let's see if we did that successfully. Here we go. So here's our brain. Let's see if I can move in a little bit here. There we go. Here's our brain. I'm going to click on it. and I'm going to drag it around, and let's just say I let go here. See what happens? Our brain went right back to its original location. If I let go here, right back to its original location. So the else statement is working. Now let's check the if statement. If it goes to that dot and I let go, it should be able to lock and I can't move it, and we'll see the score go up. So put it there. Is it locked? Yep. It's not going anywhere, but for some reason the score didn't move. So there is something that has to be gone through and seen. Why is it that the score didn't go up by 1 when I put it in there? So if I hit reset button though, this should go back to its original location, and that's perfect. So that's working the way it needs to. However, did you notice when we put it up here on the brain, the dot didn't line up properly? So this is the next thing we have to go back and check and make sure we get an incremental approach. So if we look here, the touch-up is in the coordinates. When we put the coordinates in, it's based in this top left corner. Okay, so we actually have to move everything over and up a little bit to make it cover that dot. So with the brain here, if I move it over a couple pixels to the left, that means my X is going to get a little bit smaller. And if I go up, that means my Y is going to get a little bit smaller. So here's where we can, I'm going to hit reset. Here's where we do a little bit of practice, a little bit of putzing with it. So original placement Y. I want to make this number just a little bit smaller so we can go up a little bit. Don't be too dramatic. Let's just move it up to 10. Okay, and the X, we had 129. Let's move it over just a couple to 125. I'll click off that to kind of put it in place. Now let's try it again and see what happens. I'm going to drag the brain up to the dot. Now you see we're a little closer, right? So the brain looks like it's pretty centered for the Y coordinate going up and down, but now, or I'm sorry, the X coordinate going up and down. Now we just gotta bring it up a little bit. So I'm going to go here to the Y placement, and I'm going to make it a 8. Just something a little smaller. I'm going to hit reset, and I'm going to drag it again. And we can see now that the dot is almost entirely covered. If I bring it over a little bit, I bet it will cover it. So I'm going to go back over here, and this time I'm going to change the X just a little bit to 123. Now let's see if that works. Hit reset, drag my brain, and now you can see it covers everything entirely. So in my notebook where I have my X and Y coordinates listed on my chart, I'd have to change my X and Y coordinate for the placement to 8 for the Y and 123 for the X. That's going to happen with almost all of them to make sure it lines up perfectly. So that's how you're going to get that to work. Now, a couple other little things that you could put into the brain touch-up, and then you're going to have to probably change it in the reset as well, is the fact that you're going to have to, you can do something where you can actually make, let me reset, these dots disappear after you've connected them together. But then you're going to have to put that in the reset button as well. So if you want to, I'll show you that a little bit here in the video. So let's say, and this is on the then statement, not the else, but if we're able to get it to connect properly to where it needs to be, then what we want to do is we want to have the dot disappear. Well, if it's visible now, we want to make it not visible if it connects. So what we can do here is we can go to the brain placement, and we can find where it says something about being visible, which is right here. So I can set the brain to be visible as well. Okay. And do I want it to be true or do I want it to be false? Well, if I don't want to be able to see it, that means I want to make it set to false. Okay. So if I do that now, it's going to be hard to see because it's covered. But if I drag the brain on top of the dot and I let go, right now behind the dot, or behind the brain, the dot went away. You can't see it. Here's how I can prove it. Watch me hit the reset button. The dot is gone. So how do we bring the dot back? Well, if we made it false here on the reset button, we need to make it true. So let me copy this, drag it over here in the reset button, and I'm going to make it true. Okay? So now that's working the way it should. All right. So if I hit reset now, it comes back. Okay? So that's one other additional thing you can see there. The other thing I want to show you, because you should have noticed, and by now you're like, hey, we still got an issue that's not working right. We got the brain to disable, we got the collision to work, all this is working dandy. We're able to get the brain to go back to its original location, and it moves back. Everything's dandy there. Technically, I think our score is working, but our label isn't working, right? Our label wasn't showing up. So what is it that we don't have? Well, we put the score in here and we set the reset button for the label, but did we actually ever put the score label in the brain? Hopefully you were paying attention and you caught that. So let's go over here and let's add the score label text into the brain, and that would be at the bottom. We're going to do it at the bottom because we want it to be able to update whether it's good or bad. I'm kind of setting you up that if you're going to do the decrement score, you know where to go. Now remember, there are two things that we need to set in the text. So we're going to need a join statement. What are the two things? Well, if you remember, this label is set up with a score colon and also updating the number as we go. So remember, the two things we need to join is the first piece, which is the score. You always do it in the order that you view it. So score, colon, and then the other thing we have to set up is the score itself, so as we get it. So as we get it correct, it should also be updating the score. Now, incrementally, we're going to go back before we do any other sprite here. We're going to make sure the brain does everything we want it to. So I'm going to drag it up here, and now you see that the score went to 0, or to 1. Reset, everything goes back the way it's supposed to. So that means everything is working perfectly. Okay. So now these are updated. I'm checking them off as I go. And it looks like our brain is almost all perfect. In the reset button, we've been able to reset the score and move the brain back. That's perfect. Excuse me, that's perfect. I'm not going to touch any of these additional features, but I do want to just hint to this touchdown thing because I do have this piece here that we can make it a little easier on ourselves when we're putting things together. So I just wanted to show you the touchdown part. The additional features you're going to have to work on your own to be able to figure those out. But let's go ahead and look at what I can do that will help. One of the things you haven't seen yet, because we don't have everything moving right, is that if I take the brain and I start moving around the screen, I could actually start collecting some of these sprites because they don't all work independently. They're all on the same screen. So sometimes you'll notice as you start doing additional pieces here that they're going to start to collide with each other and you have a big mess. So I'm going to show you a little thing to help not have that happen. Okay, now we know on the brain there's the touch up. That's when you lift your finger. But there's also something you can do on the touch down. So we're going to go here and we're going to pick touch down. And we're going to put that on the page. So now what this is going to do is this is what's going to happen when you actually touch the screen. When you push down, that's the touch down. When you lift up, that's the other thing. What I'm going to do for touchdown is I'm actually going to make the other sprites disappear. Not completely, just their visibility. I'm going to make them disappear here so that I don't accidentally drag them and then move them around as we start to make them movable. So on the touchdown, what you can do is you can take the other three systems, the urinary, the digestive, and the respiratory system, and we're just going to make them set to a false visible. It means we can't see them. So I'm going to find visible here for urinary system. I'm going to put that in the touchdown. Put that in the touchdown. And I'm going to set that logic to false. Now, instead of going and dragging the other ones, remember I can copy and paste this. Change the name to digestive system. And change the name for this one to respiratory system. Now you have to be aware, too, as you start doing touchdowns for the other sprites, you want to make sure you change the one here that's going to be different. Now, on the touchdown, these are going to disappear. Okay? So I'm going to show you what happens. I'm going to touch down on the brain, and they all go away. When I lift up, they're all still gone. So now what do I have to do? Well, you have to undo the work that you did. Okay, it's like a reciprocal in math. We have to undo the work. So if I made these false on the touchdown, where do I have to make them true? Hopefully you recognize you have to make them true on the touch up. So I like to put them in the blocks before the if then else statement. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in the touch up part. And then I'm going to do that several times so that I have the urinary system, the digestive system, and the respiratory system. Now I'm going to turn all these to true. And once I'm done moving it around, or once I'm done touching down on the finger, they should come back up. There we go. Touch down, touch up, touch down, touch up. Okay, that hides them so they can't get stuck together. Now, it's okay to have a little bit of redundancy in your programming as well, because it helps to make sure you don't have mistakes. So the other thing I want us to do as well is I just want to make sure that in the reset button, in case anything happens with other things, we also know that when we click reset, it's going to allow for these things to become true again. So we did brain placement visible. We can also put these three things down here in the reset button. Urinary system to visible. We can have digestive system set to visible. We can have respiratory system set to visible. And we can also do one more. We can also have the brain set to visible. And yeah, it's a little redundant here, but we know that at least if someone does something that we may not be ready for, the system will be ready for it to be seen. Okay? So now we have all our programming working really well for the brain, minus the additional features. We're able to have everything here on the event handler that we need that is required for just the brain, not the other ones, but at least you can copy and paste or kind of see how that works for you. But you're now still going to have to figure out what do you do for if you want to make the score go down if you're wrong. Okay? What if I want to have it be like when I drag my brain, I go here, if it has to go to its original location, the score now is -1. That shouldn't be too hard to figure out, but that's your choice, you and your partner's choice. There's also the number 2 part where you're going to want to set a timer. Okay? Number 2 is going to be setting a timer. So I'm going to change this word just to give you a hint. Enable. So setting the timer is number 2 here, but also that means you're going to have to reset some things in the reset button as well. The third feature, that's where you share a solution, do a solution button, and when you click on that, all the sprites go to their correct location. That you have to figure out on your own. And then there's also number 4, which is when you touch down. So I showed you how the touch down works. You can then have a description show up in a text label at the bottom, at the top, whatever you choose. So that's an additional feature that you can figure out. Remember, I'm looking for you to do at least one additional feature for proficient. If you want to be advanced, you got to be able to do 2 additional features. And if you really want to do all 4, go for it. Try it out. I think I've shown you by now my app that has all those additional features as a demonstration. So that ends our work for getting the basic things up and going for you. This should help you to get you and your partner moving and hopefully be successful in getting this project grade, this project assignment done so we can get a good score on the first major assignment of this quarter or semester. See you out there.